Hello, thanks so much for joining me and welcome back to my little studio this week. All right, so we're going to go and I'll make our little mimosa tree a little bit bigger, going to do an 8 by 10. And obviously we've got our little colour studies that we did there last week. And for me, I'm probably going to end up going in between the two. I'm going to veer towards the warmer side of things, but I am going to get a few more cools in there too. So it was a worthwhile exercise. So let's have a look at the sort of colour palette that I ended up using and then let's get painting. Okay, so as you can see, these are the colours that I actually ended up choosing. Good mixture of warm and cools in all the colours, but I've got some nice rich burgundy and a violet there as well. Now the one in the little dish, it's nothing special, just Kit Kat knocked it off the edge and it smashed. But that was one of the darker shades that I used in there. All right, so obviously, choose from your own palettes and obviously from your own colour studies as to which ones you feel are going to suit your painting and what feeling you're going to look for. All right, so let's get painting. Okay, so as you can see, I've done myself a sketch there. I've kind of gone in between, what I did last week, after my little experiment of sort of blocking in straight and then, but having some detail. I did feel I wanted to get those tree branches in there so that I made sure that I got the gesture of them. But as you can see, just very basically, I haven't done any shading with my pencil this time. I did stop myself doing that. But I just used a sort of mid-tone, sort of purple pencil to do it. Obviously, you can use green or brown or something like that, just any dark value if you want to put in those tree things. And apologies if my hands are moving around every now and again as they just did there. Initially I was trying to talk as I was painting, but unfortunately I had a problem with the audio bit, so I'm now having to do a voiceover, so excuse me if my hands sort of every now and again waft over the painting. I'm obviously trying to explain something as I'm going, but it's a little bit difficult to anticipate what on earth I'm talking about now when I go back and revisit it. But what I was doing then was I was just saying, along with my initial sketch, I did sort of put myself a bounding box around there, just a centimetre in from the edge, just to make sure that I got everything that I wanted was in the image, was going to be showing. So I just did that. I will paint off the edge and you'll lose those marks as we go along. But I did start off just putting it there just to make sure that all of what I want in that tree is going to be there. So, as I say, the first thing I did was first thing I've done now, is come in with my mid value. Normally I would come in with my darkest first, as you're seeing me doing there with the dark. But I want to make sure that I kind of get those negative shapes in the trees, so that the background colours are going to show through there. So hopefully I don't have to do too much messing around once I get a little bit further on the painting. Okay, so obviously we did the colour study last week. So you'll see me putting a couple of different colours in, sort of my light, dark, and medium toned areas. Basically just looking, obviously as I always do, look at the reference photo, see which is your darkest, see which is your lightest and what's in between. As I say, we're going to go for that lovely warm rich palette. So I'm using varying different shades of red, right from the darkest through to a sort of like an orange and a pinky colour for the sky. All right, so I will speed this little bit up, as obviously you saw me go through the colour studies last week, so you kind of know what I'm doing. So I'll speed this up and then just pop some music on for a moment, and then I'll come back in and we'll slow the video back down and I'll talk you through the next phase. All right then, I'll see you in a mo. Oh, just one thing before I pop off. The reference photo is one of my own, and I popped the link down below for you if you want to download it and have a go at painting this lovely little mimosa tree. Okay, see you in a mo. Okay, so hopefully you saw me whizzing through there, basically just doing what we did last week, just using a few different values there, light, medium and dark, and using those nice rich burgundy tones, all the tones of red right through to that lovely bright orange. And then I came in with my pot of water and just wet it all down really, so that I can get that, that sort of colour sunk into the paper. And so now the first thing you're seeing me doing now, slow the video back down for you, and we'll go through this sort of like step by step really, and take you through how I sort of like got to my end painting. I wasn't 100% with my end painting, I have to say, and it was one of those ones that hindsight, maybe I'd have done a few things differently, but we'll talk about that as we go on through. Okay, so the first thing you're seeing me doing now is sort of like re-establishing my branches there. You're going to see me coming back a few times during the painting to do this, basically just so I don't lose myself. I want to make sure that I keep the gesture of this tree. Everything sort of, whilst I'm not, I'm not hugely fussed. It's not exactly the same. I try and sort of control myself as to the level of detail I go. I think I did end up overpainting it a bit, but hey ho, as I say, this was one of hindsight and things. I'm definitely going to come back next year when the mimosas are out and have another little go at this tree, I think. But the first thing you're seeing me doing now, after I got my sort of tree branches in and things, I'm coming into those absolute darkest areas, and I've got a really super dark green in my hand. It's a bluey green, sort of like a bottley green really. But this is a very, very dark value. It's a Sennelier, I think, and it's super, super dark, sort of like almost along the levels of the Terry Ludwig infamous eggplant. It's that sort of dark in its value. Now, what I would say here is if you are using, when you are using these dark values, be a little bit careful. Keep your touch super, super light. If you want some of that lovely underpainting sort of peeking through in places, you're going to want to keep your touch super, super light. So as I say, as you can see, I'm going through the painting, or looking at my reference photos, seeing where all those really dark patches are. Now this is something, with this screen, one thing I didn't do in this, which I felt that probably would have helped me in the long run, is actually putting a bit of this green in through those orange areas where the mimosa trees, where the mimosa branches come out. I feel I should have put a bit more in those branches there at this stage. Because I find that it's when I got later on in the painting with the yellows, I did end up getting a little bit muddy and had to kind of brush a bit out, and I had to mess around quite a bit to sort of like get the greenery within the mimosa. So what I would suggest, if you're following along with me, pop a little bit of that green through those branches as well. Again, keep your touch very, very light. You don't want to go too heavy, because obviously that is, your lightest area and lightest and brightest area within the painting. But just sort of like where those, sort of like in between those branches, where you do see the leaves, just pop I would suggest just pop a little bit more in there than I have. I don't actually come out into the branches very much. I sort of go in between them, but I'm kind of avoiding all those areas that are yellow. And as I say, I think it's probably best if you do sort of like follow those branches out to the end and just put a little bit through those orange areas. And so now you can see me sort of like coming down into the bank there, basically looking at my reference photos, seeing where any of those darks are, sort of like in the river there, river bank, sort of setting out where all those sort of dark colours are, the shadow under the tree and things like that. Anywhere basically, where we've got that sort of darkest value, going back in now with this rich dark green. And you're going to see me coming up the value scale. I'm going to be using a couple of different cooler greens, but slightly lighter in their value, and you'll see me going around these areas and sort of like establishing those. So we've got that variety going on underneath. I really want this to be a nice lively little painting, and full of colour and life, which is what Portugal's was all about. So I'll let you watch me sort of like going through these darker values, and I'll see you in a mo. And so I think I've got enough information on those greens there. As you can see, came in and put sort of some indication of those background trees on the hill there. And, just anywhere I can see little patches of green, just use those few different values there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm kind of come in and I'm doing my sky now. Now, one of the things in Portugal, one of the things was it really did have this wonderful, they used to have these wonderful vivid blue skies, so clear and so fresh and beautiful. Now the photographs sort of like bleaches it out a little bit, as photographs often do. They tend to darken down your really dark areas and sort of bleach out your skies and things. So be aware of that if you're working from a photograph. Often you will find that skies tend to get bleached out a little bit. Now, as you can see, what I've done is I started with sort of like a nice sort of rich blue. The sky is slightly darker over to the left-hand side, and then to the right there's some very faint clouds there, which are sort of hardly discernible, but there is sort of like lighter to the right-hand side of the picture. So started off with the dark blue at the top and sort of bringing it down. As I'm coming down, I'm using a couple of different blues in any one area, sort of darker to the top and lightening as I come down towards the horizon. Also, as you come down towards the horizon, you tend to find that your blues tend to get a little bit more turquoisey, I guess. A little bit more cyan in there. As you come down, as you go up into the heavens and things, they're more sort of the purple, violet sort of colours, and then they tend to sort of get a little bit more turquoisey as you come down. So as you can see, coming in with some turquoisey colours there. And basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be going backwards and forwards, building up this colour there. I'm going to keep it a nice smooth sky with just sort of like a hint of slightly different colours, but I'd like it to stay nice and fresh and nice and bright. So you're going to just see me going backwards and forwards, and I sort of like once I've got enough pastel in there, you'll see me blend it out a little bit. As I say, want to keep this really soft. Don't want too much of a fractured sky up there. It's going to get a little bit fractured towards the horizon and around the branches and things, but the majority of it I'd like to keep kind of smooth. So basically I'm sort of going backwards and forwards, with the different values as I come down. And as you can see, as I'm coming down towards the horizon there, I'm using that lovely soft pinky colour there, because again, just as you kind of hit your horizon line, you usually find that you sort of like get this sort of misty, hazy, lighter tone there as you kind of sort of hit your horizon line there. So making sure that I kind of get that in. Want this, as I say, to have a lovely warm feel about it. Okay, so I'll let you watch me sort of carry on and sort of blend this sky together, trying to use the pastels as much as I can to blend. And then you do see me come in with my finger a little bit and just sort of like give it a dust off down, but keeping my touch very, very light as always. Okay, so as you can see, kind of got most of my sky in there. Now, I do come back and revisit everything. This is a painting of many layers, and sort of like basically what I try and do is work through the painting, sort of like all of the painting at the same time. So I'm always sort of like keeping a balance of, my levels all the way through. So now what you're seeing me doing is I'm coming in. I've come up the value scale a little bit more with my greens there, and I'm putting some of that green in, so like in those branches there, sort of like up in the sky. As I say, I think I should have taken a little bit of that darker value up there too and into those oranges, but I went with this at the time, and I just don't feel I got enough depth in there. It becomes a little bit difficult for me to work with, which you'll discover later on in the painting. But at the moment, you can see me. What I'm doing is I'm going back over those sort of darker areas in places, sort of like maybe where I feel the lights, hitting those leaves a little bit more. We don't want it too dark and dense in there. We want to make sure that there's interest in those greens. So using that lovely sort of, it's a little bit more of an emeraldy green, but quite soft and gentle in its appearance. So put a little bit of that in the tree there, and coming down into my grasses at the front. And basically, I'm going to be putting this sort of this colour in, again in sort of like all the areas I can see it. Now, with my river, I'm not going to be using it in my river. I'm going to be using it for the dark, for the grassy patches, and some in the distant background, because it's quite a cool green still. And as you can see, if you're looking at the reference photo, you can see the river is much warmer in its feel. It's sort of like almost, goes into browns and bronzes and things like that, because it's, the deep river is towards the back, and obviously this little bit at the front there is more of a sort of tributary. No, that's the wrong word. But it's very shallow anyway, and sort of coming around the island, so you can kind of see the sand underneath it, because it's very, very shallow there. So as I say, not using this green in that river, but just using it in the background there, because obviously I want to push that into the background. Those reds are a little bit strong, or very strong at the moment. So we're going to need to push those back with a little bit of cooler colours. So using that green, as I say, in these grasses to the front, because they're going to be a mixture of warm and cool, and in the distance, and obviously sort of like in my tree branches there. And now coming up the value scale just that little bit more with this lovely sort of, again, cool green here. As I say, put a little bit too much light in those orange areas. But as you can see, sort of like, using it sort of like within those, using these different greens within those, within that dense foliage underneath, it's creating some really lovely sort of mottly effects under there. And you're really starting to see those pastels start to mix together and create some interesting colour and, some interest going on there. Obviously, as you can see, my touch is really, really light because I really do want to make sure that I get those colour. I don't want solid blocks of colour under there. I really want to get that interest going on. So that's what you're seeing me doing. And my touch is really, really light. That's one thing with me. You find that, very rarely do I put down, big, strong, hard marks. I really like to work through a painting, in soft, gentle layers. So you're seeing all those lovely subtle mixes going on. So I kind of think I'm kind of there with my tree now. Now what I need to do is sort of, as I say, push that hillside into the background a little bit. So now, and get, lose some of those bright reds. We need to knock that down. I still want to keep some of those interesting colours peeping through the painting at times. So I really want to try and not overpaint this. Although, as I say, I did a little bit. But I'm starting off and I'm using this lovely sort of purpley colour, sort of lilac-y purple now. It's quite, sort of mid to light value here. And I'm just sort of going over those areas, and as you can see, it's starting to change, starting to interact with the orange that, orangey reds that I've got underneath there. And I'm going to be using a couple of different colours here. Now I've sort of come down the value scale this time, going into the base of those trees, with sort of like a greyed out sort of, purple here. It's quite greyed out, a little bit darker in its value. Looking at sort of, I don't want to get sort of too caught up in detail at the back. I want it to kind of be a little bit blurry and a little bit out of focus there. But I'd like to, obviously give the indication that that it's a hillside and there's terraces and all sorts of different foliage going on there. So you'll see me again using the couple of different values there, and a couple, to try and create that interest in going on. But at the moment, I'm trying to sort of cool it down a little bit. So using these mixtures of lilacs and purples. And now using sort of another green. This again is a cooler green. Again, looking at the reference photos, seeing sort of like where there's little clumps of green trees. Now the mimosa in Portugal, it comes out sort of like late February, early March. And so some of those trees in the background, they've got no foliage on, whereas you've got your others there that are sort of your evergreens there. So there's a little bit of green going on there, but lots of branches and all sorts of things. And as you can see, sort of popping in, making sure that I'm looking at those negative spaces in the trees as well, because obviously you're seeing the background through those. So you see me sort of pop in, sort of in the middle of those trees, using those colours there, and gently just sort of skimming my pastels over, just so that they're gently just sort of those colours are teasing together really. Now, as with the sky and everything, I will go back and revisit this. But, at the moment, I think I've kind of got a rough indication of sort of the colours and things I want in that background area. So I'm going to come down now onto sort of my river areas in just a moment. And you'll see me there as I come down, as I mentioned earlier, going to be using some warmer greens in there. So I'll just let you watch me sort of like carry on with these sort of base layers and sort of getting this sort of like going and getting the balance sort of like all up to the same kind of level. All right then, I'll let you watch this and I'll see you in a mo. So as you can see, starting to build up the colour in these areas, really enjoying all these pretty colours coming through. I wanted this painting to, to feel lively and alive, and this little tree to feel young and free. I didn't quite achieve it, and I know I'm going to come back and revisit this next year and do it on a larger scale where I can be a bit more expressive with my strokes. But for this year, it does end up a little bit detailed, but I did enjoy, I did enjoy the process of doing it, but think I was a little bit too tentative working with those yellows. So anyway, at the moment now, what you're seeing me doing, as you can see, I came in, added another couple of little extra greens to the grass, and we've put in that river. And now I'm coming back in, and I'm sort of re-putting some of that vibrant orange into the foliage area, or the flower areas of the trees. Now I'm doing this, obviously, we're going to end up yellow, but I want to end up, these little buds that, when they're very first new on the tree, they're quite a limey greeny yellow, and then as they sort of like go through their cycles, they get sort of more orangey, sort of mustardy colours. So I want that warmth coming through. I want the mixture of colours going on even within the mimosa. So you go back and re-establish those those areas with that orange. And now you're seeing me, I'm coming back down. I'm going to attack that little bank. I noticed when I sort of replayed the video that I actually forgot to put any kind of value down there in my underpainting, and just sort of like left it fairly blank. I think I just put maybe a smidgen of pale pink, but it's quite deceptive. It's light in places but slightly darker, so I'm using sort of like it's a pinky lilac. It's sort of greyed out pinky lilac, which I'm using to start me off down in those sands there. But I know that's going to be too pink. So coming in now with more of an ochre colour, just to quieten that down. In some areas, we want it quite colourful, and in other areas, we just want to soften it down and having more neutral. It's very important to have a balance of your neutral colours within your painting, as to help your bright colours sing. And that's this is all about that tree, and the background is a complement to our little tree. So we want to make sure that we get our neutrals. Now, I tend to sort of use a couple of complementary colours, like I did there, or sort of colours that are in the same value, but are giving me different. Different colour hues. So obviously, I started with the pinkies and then went more through to the, ochre sort of side of things. You have to be a little bit careful when you're working with sort of warm and cool colours together, or colours that have different different bases to them, because you can end up creating mud. Now, as I say, we want to create our neutrals in those areas. So that's kind of okay, but you could end up with a very yucky colour if you have your stroke too light. So have your stroke too heavy, rather. Sorry. So keep your strokes nice and light, and and build up slowly. So as you can see, coming back in and giving myself an indication of that back, those back trees in the mountain there, using a blue, a sort of slightly darker blue or green. And now you can see me coming in with my paintbrush, Kitty's paintbrush. It's just soft. It's soft and it's dry. And as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm literally just kind of softening down the areas. I want to encourage those pastels to blend. I don't want to sort of merge them together too much, but I want them to, to give us this nice sort of soft mottly effect, so we can see those sort of colours. So, I lift out a little bit of pastel, and then I use my finger there, as you can see, and just sort of like gently tease them together. And you'll see me doing that throughout the painting. As I say, some areas we want to pull forward and some areas we want to sort of soften off. So that's really what I'm doing, just sort of kind of teasing, if you can watch my paintbrush there, just kind of teasing those colours together a little bit, and then coming in with my finger, and kind of using it in the direction, as you can see when I sort of did the towards the distance on the river and things, using horizontal horizontal strokes and using sort of like vertical strokes as I'm coming through to these front grasses. So right from sort of the get-go, trying to get the direction of things going. This helps me kind of know where I am in the painting, and also gives us that right feel. Things are going as you kind of see them. Your grasses and things are vertical, and sort of your river is obviously horizontal. As you can see, sort of like blended out those areas, as I say, using directional strokes. And talking about that, I'm now going to be working on this sort of like little bank here a little bit more. I want to introduce some of those darker shadows in there. So I've come in with a slightly darker greyed out purple there. Purples are great in the shadows. And what you can see me doing now is I'm using my finger in a little bit of a firmer fashion. I'm pulling down that shadow, the colours of the darker shadow into the sands there. So I'm trying to create sort of like soft edges, whilst obviously you've got the division between the shadow and the sands, those edges of those shadows are slightly lighter. So you want soft edges there. Don't want to create too hard edges. So encouraging that pastel to sort of like, those colours to blend in together, and, pulling down some of those greens into that purple. And then again, sort of pulling them across to the river. So now I'm just sort of like adding a couple of little bit more, a couple more colours as I see them, in there. We're going to be sort of spraying this down in a minute, but I just want to, as you see me now, I'm up in the back trees, just softening that down a little bit. I want to make sure that we've got some space in those trees, where the light's coming through. So don't want that as a sort of like heavy block at the moment. And obviously where you're working sort of like at your horizon line and you've got your sky sort of meeting your trees and things, your trees often are a darker value, and I find it helpful to soften those off right from the beginning, so that I'm not dragging too much of that dark pastel back up into the sky, and I try not to mess around with it too much. I will go back into it, but hopefully not too much. And so now I've got my continuous spray bottle with some alcohol in. You could use water, but using alcohol, what I want to do now is set these colours in. We don't want them sort of now merging too much with each other. So setting them in place, so that we can keep, our colours that we put on nice and fresh and bright. Now, I use a continuous spray bottle there, basically because, we've done a lot of the work in establishing where everything is. And so therefore, we don't want sort of things to be, moving around too much. So using the continuous spray bottle, everything kind of stays where it is, but it sets it in place so that we can come in with these lovely fresh colours and keep things all nice and bright and fresh. So you can see me going up into the sky there, and you saw me sort of holding a couple of darker blue pastels there showing you. I felt when I looked at that first darker blue pastel that I put down, it was a little bit greyed out for my liking. I wanted the vividness of these Portuguese skies, the lovely sort of azure colour that you get down there. The light is absolutely wonderful. So I chose a different blue to use in there, took away that more greyed out blue and introduced that slightly more vibrant one. So you're seeing me now basically adding some more colour into that sky, and sort of like what I want to do is encourage that sky down into the landscape. So you'll see me sort of coming in and blending again, but basically getting a little bit more pastel on there, and sort of blending it together and getting it into that horizon. As you can see there, I'm using vertical strokes just to tease it down on into those trees so that we can keep the lightness in those trees. So as you can see, we're kind of there with our sky now, put in a few more pastels, got a little bit more colour down there. Probably we'll come back and revisit it, but for the time being, happy to leave that as it is. So now you see me coming in, back in with, one of my darker values now. Just trying to, gently tease those into the sky. Need to be a little bit careful on those top branches, especially that they're going into the sky, that we don't end up too mucky up there. Because you can end up with a green sky, and we don't want to do that. We want to keep the sky nice and fresh and blue. So now sort of going into sort of the centre of that tree. Now this is a sort of, it's one of the darker values, and it's a bluey green. So want to, the foliage on the mimosa is quite sort of bluey green. It's not an olivey green, but I want the sort of mixture of warm and cool under there. So touch is really super, super light, but just adding another little nuance of colour, building up those layers a little bit more. Now, I want to take care because this tree is quite to the foreground, so I really do want to make those darks interesting. And obviously every time you sort of move a pastel over, you create a slightly different colour. And this is why I like to build up in layers softly and gently so that I'm not going to get solid masses of colour. And as I say, especially in this, because you've got quite a lot of dark right to the foreground of the picture. So if you just have that as, one solid colour green, it could well look, too heavy, and just too blocky. Obviously if you want to do a blocky blocky painting, then that's absolutely fine. Go with that, and you certainly don't need to do all the layers. But if you want something that has, sort of like a little bit more interest all the way through, building up in layers is the way to do it. And really softly and gently let your painting develop. All together, so that you're constantly, sort of going through your painting, re-evaluating, adding little subtle nuances, where you see them. And it's totally up to you, how far you want to take it. You've just got, it really is, it's sort of, everybody's paintings, once you've got your sort of basic colours down, it's really up to you how far you want to sort of take that through to the end, how finished you want to make it, how detailed you want to make it. And what kind of style you're looking for. But, obviously if you like these sort of end results that I get, this is the way I do it, in lots of soft and gentle layers. So having put a couple of more greens in my tree now going back to that background area and sort of adding, this is sort of like a slightly more pink in its tone. It's kind of a minky colour that I'm putting in, where in those areas. Because as I mentioned earlier, the trees in Portugal at this time of year, some of them have no foliage on, and some of them have, still are evergreen. You've got a lovely mixture of trees over there on the other side of the valley. As I say, we don't want to get too caught up in detail, so we just kind of want to create the impression of them, and without painting every single branch and every single tree in its exact place. We just want to give the impression of those barefaced trees, and those sort of, the heathers that are going through there and things like that, all the colours that are going on over there. So now I've decided, all right, now I've kind of got those colours down. I need to get my yellows down to see whether, the balance of things. So coming in with a sort of, it's a nice warm yellow, this one. Quite rich, and as you can see, going up into my trees again, touch is super light. I just want to sort of give a haze, but I always want the colours underneath coming through, and I'm trying to sort of get the gesture of the way these branches are sort of going out. So using my strokes to in different directions to help me sort of build up those levels really, and build up that direction that things are going in. So you see me kind of tilting my pastel. In some areas I'm putting it down, slightly stronger, and obviously up in the sky, nice and gentle up there. So, if you want to create direction, that's a really good thing to practice with your pastels, on an old scrap of paper or whatever. Practice moving your hand in different directions, varying your levels of pressure that you're putting down. Go from the strongest mark you can make, right through to the lightest. But, talking about that, maybe I'll do a little video of, different ways that you can use your pastels, and some exercises that can kind of help you, as you're going, create the marks that you want to create. And as you can see, obviously skimming the pastel over, because we've kind of set in what's going on underneath, we're able to get those lovely sort of, areas of where it's just sort of skimmed over and you've got all those colours sort of showing through. They're kind of vibrating already, and already we've got those, gorgeous colours going on. Now, at this point, we're not at a point where we're anywhere near sort of finishing our mimosa tree. We just, I just want to be getting the main bulk of colour down. Really, this is for me, is to kind of judge, how much I want to knock that, how much I want to knock that background back. And now I've sort of got the basis of that yellow in. I am coming into the background because it now feels a little bit too pinky. I want that, I want sort of touches of pink and things going on over there. But just calming it down a little bit, as I did with the sand earlier, with that little bit of ochre. Always remembering to come into those sort of centre areas of the trees, the negative spaces in the trees where you're sort of seeing the background through. And obviously using that colour again. Basically, whenever I've got a pastel in my my hand, I always think, well, is there anywhere else I can use it, whilst I've got it in my hand? So using it sort of a little bit in the front sands, and now sort of a little bit in the river, where you can see the shallow part of the river there. You can see the golden sands sort of coming through the river, and you've got these lovely sort of goldeny tones throughout there. So again, using it very, very lightly, just popping a little bit in there. And now sort of going back up into my tree again, having a little look. I'm thinking, okay, need a little bit more contrast there, because that's really what's going to help your mimosa, your bright colours sing is keeping that contrast. So you don't want it all too samey within its levels at this stage. You want a few little dark bits in there. Like I say, we want to keep those, that dark area interesting. So you want, you want to sort of pop a couple of bit, where you can see the darker areas, pop a little, you can go back in. This is that dark blue bottle green pastel that I used right at the beginning, and popping a little bit of that in there, coming in between those those sort of branches at the side there, where you've got the shapes of the mimosa and things. So again, popping a little bit in there, making sure that I don't kind of lose that, and again, as you can see, all these beautiful colours sort of, being created there as you're gently dragging through. Obviously, if you as I say, when you're working with this very dark value, do be careful, because it's super dark. And the real thing here is, if you want these colours sort of popping through, keep your touch really very, very light. All right, so now I'm sort of like, I'm wanting to define, I've realised there that, I've got that little piece of river at the back there, behind that grassy tuft over to the left. So I want to get that in so I don't end up, losing where I am in the painting. So just using a nice warm green there in the river, just to sort of bring that back out, and, so that you can see that river going on in the background. Again, like I said earlier, we don't want to get too detailed. But obviously, as we're coming sort of towards us in the picture, you see, more and more detail, and less as you go into, the hillside there. So coming in, warming up that river a little bit, got a dark warm green, and just warming up that river a little bit, and then taking this sort of like lovely sort of mauvey colour, browny. It's a dark red actually, but taking a bit of that into the background. And basically, at the moment, I'm just sort of building up this next layer so that I can get it to the same sort of level. Decided I wanted a little bit more foliage up in the sky. So you see me kind of popping around for a little bit, just trying to sort of bring it up to this next level. Now popping a little bit more of that bluey green in the foliage there. And basically, you just see me going backwards and forwards, and just trying to establish my balance. And at this stage, I'm still absolutely fine with gently teasing those pastels together and, sort of blending them out in places. And as I do with my pastels, if you notice, I use my finger. It's a tool, so I use it in different levels of pressure and also direction and things. And that's helping me create sort of soft edges where I want, and the feeling of the direction of things that are going in. So now I'm coming down. I'm going to come down into these front grasses. I'm going to get a little bit of colour there, and that's again going to help me discover, how far I need to push that hillside back there. So you're going to see me coming through the grasses now with a few different greens, and just starting to build up that a little bit more. So as you see, sort of mainly keeping to this front area of the painting, adding a few more colours, then blending them in a little bit. Really what I just want to do is just create that colour balance going on at the moment, just so that it's got a kind of, I kind of know, the colours in my foreground, and I can work out, what I need to do to the background. But for the time being, I've just noticed there that, my tree trunk is disappearing. So I want to get that back in, want to, sort of like re-establish that and work on these tree trunks and branches just for a little bit, just to make sure that I kind of don't lose them along the way. Obviously going to come back later and sort of, play around with them some more, no doubt. But just want to make sure that I kind of keep them in focus. And so what you're going to see me doing now is sort of working through the bottom part of the tree, getting some more darks in there, where that dark foliage at the bottom of the tree there, get that in and get a little bit more colour going on at the base of this tree. So as you saw, obviously once I got that base in, I then went up into the sort of like middle of the tree again. Just literally going backwards and forwards, just keep, re-establishing my darks and my lights, and, just trying to look at the reference picture, seeing where those kind of shadows are creating, and where you've got like little patches of dark. Now, as I'm looking at it, I sort of, want to tidy it up a little bit more. Tidy as you go. If you've got to, because or else you'll find those pastels harder to cover, especially when you've got that contrast there. So you see me then just coming in with a dry paintbrush, just sort of like taking out some of that heavy pastel that I put down. Because obviously, unfortunately, this is, it's only an 8x10. I'm going to come back. I know I'm going to come back and revisit this next year. And I'd like it even, to be more expressive. I did overpaint this, as you'll see. But, at this stage, I'm really enjoying these gorgeous colours and things. And, they're so lush. And, when I look back, I kind of really, I like the energy of it at this stage and things like that, but it, I ended up sort of taking it a little bit too far. I'll tell you at a point where I sort of think I started to go wrong with this particular painting. It did end up okay in the end, but I felt it could have been better, one of those ones. So obviously, yes, now what you're seeing me doing, sorry, waffling on there. Now what you're seeing me doing is I'm coming back into the background, in those negative spaces in the trees and things. Now that I've got the majority of the tree colours that I want, apart from the yellows, but in my levels of light and dark under there, as you can see, as soon as I sort of put that lilac-y under that left-hand branch there, and where I'm working at the moment, how it then brings that branch forward and it knocks back what's in the distance. Using those sort of lighter, cooler colours, it's helping us bring this tree forward. So you're going to see me sort of, basically, I go around and I'm now just building up the levels of detail, doing exactly as I have been doing. And sort of I pop around the picture and I always do what I see, so if something's obvious to me, I'll go in and sort of, deal with it then and there. But that's, you see me pop around the picture, trying to sort of pull it together, trying to tease it out. And so now, as you're looking at me now, I'm coming back down into this foreground, going to get a little bit more detail. Now I've kind of got the background and the tree kind of to a point, going to sort of start bringing some more depth to this foreground here. And, working on my shadows on the bank and things like that, adding a couple of little darker values there in that sand. And I'm going to sort of mute down that sand with sort of some greyed out purples and a little bit of bluey grey in there. It's a little bit too sandy colour, and I want to kind of knock that back a little bit because it's competing a little bit with the Mimosa. It will do because it's quite a light value, and I want to make sure that the Mimosa stands out in front of that. So as you see me now, I've got sort of like it's a bluey grey there that I'm using just to take the brightness off of that and just mute it down a little bit. So as you can see, obviously sort of starting to build up some detail there, starting to build up the depth rather in those grasses and things. So now what I want to do is I want to come in back into my mimosa now, into those gorgeous little flowers, that sort of those bursts of yellow. So want to get, some of these branches pulled back out now over the top of that, background that I put down. So coming back in with that lovely sort of warm yellow there, and just sort of trying to establish those lower branches, pulling them out over the background that I've put down, and basically going up my tree and just adding a little bit more depth to it, and a little bit more yellow, so it's not quite so orangey. So I'm going to be using a couple of yellows, both in, or a few, both in value and in sort of warm and cool. Basically, I'm going to be sort of like introducing, a few different. And as you see, every now and again, you'll see me coming in with my paintbrush to soften things down a little bit, if it's feeling a little bit too clumpy. So obviously you see me sort of popping off into the background every now and again. And I just wanted to pop in at this stage. Now this particular area of the tree, this is where I really felt that, when I mentioned earlier that I felt that I could have done with some more darker values out there. Now you'll see me come in with my finger in a moment and kind of swoosh it, and I end up going backwards and forwards a lot, trying to get it, obviously they are clumps of flowers, but, there is sort of air in between them and leaves in between them and things. And I felt that sort of, I'm having to go backwards and forwards too many times with these dark values to try and, sort of break it up. And I felt that if I'd have had those dark values underneath set in, then when I come in with my finger and swoosh, it's going to be showing greens and not the oranges. There was not enough contrast going on there when I was sort of like, dragging them back in. And as I say, I end up going backwards and forwards, especially over this part of the tree. So do bear that in mind. I could. It needed a little bit more depth underneath there, a little bit more contrast to help those yellows sort of pop out and sing. So now what you're going to see me doing, I'm now coming in with a more lemon yellow, little cooler, and wanting to get these sort of edges, where the sunlight's hitting these branches and things. So I'm going to be coming through my tree with a few different yellows now. I think I probably ended up with one yellow too many. I think I should have just stayed with those, with the orange and the warm yellow and this cool yellow, and left it at that. But and maybe the pale green. But you live and learn. This is my first time of painting mimosas, and as I say, what I want to do is come back next year, and I want to paint this painting bigger and have it more expressive and a lot looser. But maybe going along more of these colour lines that you're actually seeing now, because I actually really enjoyed the vibrancy at this kind of stage. But we'll come back to that next year. But I'll let you watch me sort of come up the value scale and going through my trees really, and just adding a little bit more depth to that tree, because obviously those are you've got quite clumpy bits in there. So I'll let you watch that, and I'll see you in a mo. And so, as you can see, sort of added some more yellows into there. Now, again, I was using a Sennelier pastel, which is super, super soft. And I felt at this stage, some of my marks were a little bit too heavy. And again, a little bit later on in the painting, I sort of fight against those a little bit. So be really, really careful. I could have probably done with a slightly harder pastel than a Sennelier because they are super soft. And sort of like a little bit, questionable as to where they end up going on your paper. So take a little bit of care if you are using soft pastels. And I would say, try and still keep your strokes a little bit lighter. I went in a little bit too heavy, a little bit too quickly. But so hopefully, you can learn from my mistakes and things as I've gone along. But basically, I've kind of got enough colour in there for the time being, and I'm feeling, happy enough. I'm not happy, but I'm happy enough at this stage. So what I'm going to do now is basically it's a sort of repeat process really of going back round everything using sort of, the same sort of colours, ending using a couple of extra colours, softening down, sort of bringing out some detail and things. But, until I get to the point that I sort of like feel happy with the painting. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed this section up a little bit because, obviously it all depends on what kind of marks you put down and things as to what you need to adjust and whatever. But I'll keep it running, and what I'll do is come in before the end and we'll give this painting a little bit of a review and recap over the points that I think I could have changed and improved it, and hopefully what I've learnt from it, and that I can take through to next year. All right then, as I say, speed it up and pop a little bit of music on from Mo, and I'll see you in a while. So as you can see, obviously it's been a kind of push me, pull you, sort of scenario between the back and the front. I'm slowing down the video again just for a little bit, just to sort of show you how I'm dealing with this tree, this tree trunk and branches there. Because obviously when you look at the reference, we've actually got one, sort of one center branch, but there's another one sort of behind it, and the kind of branches split in an unusual place, which I didn't notice at first. But now what I'm doing is I want to make sure that it feels a little bit, those branches are a little bit too dark and heavy, and that tree trunk's a little bit too dark and heavy. And obviously it's catching the light from the right-hand side. So at the right, it's much, quite a bit lighter. And then hopefully to sort of curve us around the corner using a couple of different values there. But I'll be quiet and just kind of let you watch this tree trunk come into shape a little bit more. But I thought I'd slow the video back down just so that you can see how I deal with this. Okay, I'll see you in a mo. So I'm kind of down to my finishing touches, been around the houses a little bit. But as I say, learning curve for me. And I know that I do want to come back and revisit this painting. As I mentioned earlier, I love the freedom and the colours at a certain stage of this painting. But, I think I restricted myself a little bit by going for just such a small piece of paper, a 10 by 8, and I really wasn't able to create the expression that I really wanted from this. I mean, it ends up, quite a pretty little picture. But for me, sort of like having lived there and, experienced Portugal and whatever, it just didn't give me quite the feel that I was looking for. But, it still looks like a mimosa tree and still quite a pretty little painting. But as I say, a couple of things I've learned from this. Next year round, I'm going to come back and do it bigger and want to make it a little bit more expressive. And, sort of like as I mentioned earlier, make sure that I get some of those dark values in those mimosas that are actually coming out of the tree there to the right hand side. But and also not to use too many yellows in there, and try and keep my touch with those yellows as light as possible for as long as possible, so that I don't have to do too much sort of going backwards and forwards. As I say, recovered it, but it took me a while, and it's not quite as fresh as I would have liked it to be. But I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've learnt something along the way, and I hope you have a go at painting a mimosa. They're quite tricky, all these yellows, but give it a go. You never know. And I'd, obviously, as I always say to you, if you do, I'd really love to see what you come up with. And if you learnt any lessons along the way, and just basically how you got on, and to see what your finished little mimosa tree looks like. So in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me once again, spending some of your time with me. I do appreciate it. I'll take you on and show you the finished painting. I do when the video finishes, I come back and do just a couple of little finishing touches, and show you the finished picture there. Okay, thanks once again so much. I look forward to seeing you soon. I hope you get a chance to do some painting, and if you do, happy painting.